What we need to do is increase the value of our shares. Even if it's just an increase of a few points upon the stock exchange, it can be very valuable. So to help us achieve this end, I propose that we start buying out our competition. They get enticed by a large cash sum, we get their rail lines, then we gain their greater profits down the road that will justify the expenditure of buying them out. Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming, Ticket to Ride. For this episode, we will be discussing how to go about scoring points within the game. But before delving into today's episode, let's talk about today's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Ghost and Campfire Stories of Huntington Lake, a collection of original fiction set in and around the area of Huntington Lake, California. These range from lake monsters that possess a threat to human beings to roaming spirits of dead airmen. Accompanying these stories are a few illustrations that are peppered throughout the collection. This collection of stories can be bought on Amazon in paperback form or for your Kindle. A link will be provided in this episode's description for those interested in obtaining a copy for themselves. So big thank you to Ghost and Campfire Stories of Huntington Lake for sponsoring this episode, and with that taken care of, let's get into today's episode. With the calculating of the score, it is done at the end of the game. Although players should account for the points that they earned had they completed different routes during the game itself, players should be free to recount the points from each player's route to help ensure that no mistakes were made. Miscounting actually occurred in a game or two that we played, so we understand the value of verifying this count. With Markland, this recounting also extends to the merchandise tokens that a given player's passengers have collected. And even though there are some players who like to add the points to the routes that were claimed at the end of the game instead of when the routes were initially claimed, this isn't always possible with all of the maps. An example of this is with the United Kingdom due to some routes being affected by technologies such as the boiler lagging or the steam turbines. With such technologies, waiting until the end of the game to calculate the route points simply will not work. This also extends that of Africa, where scoring some of the routes results in them being doubled, making the scoring of the routes at the end of the game impractical. In situations where players are likely to forget to immediately score some of the routes that were claimed, we recommend that a given player is designated as the scorekeeper at the beginning of the game. So the role of the scorekeeper will be to move the score markers throughout the entire game, or to prompt the other players to move them if said players forget to do so. After verifying the route points, the player should reveal all of their destination tickets and then add up or subtract the value of the destination tickets found in their hand. This adding or subtracting of points is based upon if the destination ticket was successfully completed or not in connecting the two destination points. If successfully completing the tickets, add that destination value to the player's final score. But if it was unsuccessful, then subtract that destination value from the player's final score. With Europe, it is worth remembering that with each station that a player uses, it will be used to claim one and only one route that belongs to an opposing player into or out of a given destination for purposes of completing a destination ticket. If the player is using the same station to help to complete several different destination tickets, that said player will have to use the same route into or out of the destination with a station for all of those said destination tickets. When playing upon the Great Lakes or world maps, players will gain points for each harbor that they have built at the end of the game. It is worth noting that these points will vary depending upon which map is being played upon. And with the world map, the awarding of points include the tour tickets. If a player has two or more harbors are named upon the same ticket, then said player will gain points for each harbor listed upon the ticket. And though players are not required to build harbors, they will lose 4 points at the end of the game for each harbor that they didn't build during the game. On the world map, the player will get 20 points for one completed ticket into a harbor, while with the Great Lakes map, the player will gain 10 points for each completed ticket into a harbor. On the world map, the player will get 30 points for 2 completed tickets into a harbor, while with the Great Lakes map, the player will gain 20 points for 2 completed tickets into a harbor. On the world map, the player will get 40 points for 3 or more completed tickets into a harbor, while with the Great Lakes map, the player will get 30 points for 3 or more completed tickets into a harbor. With the Amsterdam map, score any merchandise bonus points for each player is to count the number of merchandise bonus cards that they connected during the game, check their relative positions, and then gain bonus points according to the following chart. When there are 4 players, the player in the first place will get an additional 8 points, the player in second place will get an additional 6 points, the player in third place will get an additional 4 points, and the player in fourth place will get an additional 2 points. When there are 3 players, the player in first place will get an additional 8 points, the player in second place will get an additional 5 points, and the player in third place will get an additional 2 points. When there are 2 players, the player in first will get an additional 8 points, while the player in second place will get an additional 4 points. If there is a player that doesn't own any merchandise bonus cards, then they do not get a bonus. And in case of a tie, all tied players will score the points for the corresponding rank, with the subsequent rank or ranks being ignored. With the London map, record the value for each district that is completed. With districts, they're made up of locations that are the same color and number, where the number is equal to the points value of that given district. In order to complete a district, a player will have to link each location with each other found in that district, though in no particular order. With New York City, each player will score 1 point for each tourist attraction that they connect with one or more of the route that they have claimed. With San Francisco, each player will score points for each tourist token that they collected during the game. The value for this collection is based upon the following chart. If the player obtained 1 or no tourist tokens, then they will score no points. If the player collected 2 tourist tokens, then they'll score 1 point. If the player obtained 3 tourist tokens, then they'll score 2 points. If the player obtained 4 tourist tokens, then they'll score 4 points. If the player obtained 5 tourist tokens, then they'll score 6 points. If the player obtained 6 tourist tokens, then they'll score 9 points. And if the player obtained 7 tourist tokens, then they will score 12 points. There are also some endgame bonus cards in play. The first one we'll be looking at has to do with the longest continuous path of routes. With this bonus, it applies to Europe, India, Legendary Asia, Switzerland, Team Asia, and the United States maps. To determine the longest path, only take into account continuous lines of train cars that consist of the same color. This continuous path can include loops and passes through the same city multiple times, but a given train can only be counted once, never twice, in the same continuous path. In the case of a tie, the longest path bonus will be given to both players, and each of the tying players will receive the same amount of points. With Europe, France, India, Legendary Asia, Switzerland, Team Asia, and the United States, the player will receive 10 points for the longest route. With Europe, the stations and opponent-controlled routes will not count for the purposes of calculating and claiming the longest path. With Legendary Asia, the longest route consists of the most cities found in one continuous network and the trains of the player's selected color, and though networks can have various branches connected to one another, as well as loops, each city of the network can only be counted once. With Team Asia, if 2 teams are tied for this bonus, then both of them will score it. With USA 1910, Africa, France, Germany, Markland, Nordic countries, Old West, Pennsylvania, and Team Asia, they have the Globetrotter bonus as awarded for completing the most number of tickets at the end of the game. With the USA 1910 variant of the game, it replaces the longest route bonus with the Globetrotter bonus. For USA 1910, Africa, Markland, Nordic countries, and Team Asia, the Globetrotter bonus awards 10 points to the player who achieved it. For France, Germany, Old West, and Pennsylvania, it awards 15 points to the player who achieved it. If there are 2 or more players who achieve the same number of completed destination tickets, then each player will score the bonus. If there are any uncompleted destination tickets in the player's possession, they will have no effect upon determining which player or players will gain the Globetrotter bonus. With Italy, Japan, Poland, and the United Kingdom, they do not have the longest route or Globetrotter bonuses present in their game. With Germany, each player will score additional points based upon the passengers that they collected throughout the game. With the passenger color that they are leading in, this player will score 20 additional points, with the player who lands in second place regarding passenger color will score 10 additional points. But if there are 2 or more players who are tied for the most passengers of a given color, then each player will score an additional 20 points, with no points being awarded to any player who just so happens to come in second. But if there is one player who has the most passengers in a given color, and there are 2 or more players who are tied for second place, then tied players will score 10 points. With India, each player can also gain the Grand Tour of India bonuses. Any destination ticket where 2 of the destinations are linked through at least 2 distinct continuous paths of their own train cars will qualify for a Grand Tour bonus. Although these 2 paths are allowed to intersect, they cannot share any trains. The size of the bonus will vary depending upon the number of qualifying destination tickets the player has as per the Manila bonus table shown on the map. With the player's first and second qualifying destination tickets, they're worth plus 5 points for each one, with the next 3 being worth a plus 10 for each one. Each qualifying ticket beyond the 5th one will earn the player no additional points, thus capping the limit at 40 points. These bonuses are scored on top of the points that are earned for completing the destination tickets themselves. So the Manilas look like this. 1 is equal to 5, 2 is equal to 10, 3 is equal to 20, 4 is equal to 30, and 5 is equal to 40. With Japan, depending upon the player count and their relative positions upon the bullet train track, players will win or lose bonus points according to the following chart. If there are 5 players, the player in first will get an additional 25 points, the player in second place will get an additional 15 points, the player in third place will get an additional 5 points, the player in fourth place will lose 5 points, and the player in fifth place will lose 10 points. When there are 4 players, the player in first place will get an additional 20 points, the player in second place will get an additional 15 points, the player in third place will get no points, and the player in fourth place will lose 10 points. When there are 3 players, the player in first place will get an additional 15 points, the player in second place will get an additional 5 points, and the player in third place will lose 10 points. When there are 2 players, the player in first place will get an additional 10 points, while the player in second place will lose 10 points. But regardless where the players place, if there are no bullet trains, the players will lose 20 points. In the case of a tie, then all the tie players will score the points for the given position. For the next players, they get the points from the position as if there were no tie. With Markland, players will earn points for the collected merchandise tokens, which was addressed earlier. With Netherlands, players can receive a bonus that is based upon how many points worth of Brit Soul tokens that they still have in their stash in relation to the other players. The bonus points a player will score is based upon the total value of Brit Soul tokens they possess at the end of the game. If there are 5 players, the player in first place will get an additional 55 points, the player in second place will get an additional 35 points, the player in third place will get an additional 20 points, the player in fourth place will get an additional 10 points, and the player in fifth place will get no points. When there are 4 players, the player in first place will get an additional 55 points, the player in second place will get an additional 35 points, the player in third place will get an additional 20 points, and the player in fourth place will get no points. When there are 3 players, the player in first place will get an additional 55 points, the player in second place will get an additional 35 points, and the player in third place will get no points. When there are 2 players, the player in first place will get an additional 35 points, while the player in second place will get no points. It is important to note that while playing Netherlands, any loan that is taken out during the game will disqualify the player who took it out from taking any of the bonus coins at the end of the game. When it comes to that, on the Bristol tokens, if 2 or more players have the same value among the Bristol tokens left in their stash, then each player will score the corresponding points. Aside from helping to determine which bonus the players will be receiving, the Bristol tokens that are left over at the end of the game possess no value and thus will score no direct points for the player. With Italy, there are 17 named regions found on its map, with all cities being a part of one of these regions. This is denoted by the unique coat of arms of the city spots, the text color, and the text found under their name. At the end of the game, each player will count the number of regions they connected and will score points according to the following chart. With 5 regions, score 1 point. With 6 regions, score 2 points. With 7 regions, score 4 points. With 8 regions, score 7 points. With 9 regions, score 11 points. With 10 regions, score 16 points. With 11 regions, score 22 points. With 12 regions, score 29 points. With 13 regions, score 37 points. With 14 regions, score 46 points. And with 15 or more regions, score 56 points. If a player has 2 or more district networks, then these networks are to be scored separately. There are also 3 separate regions found on the board: Sardinia, Sicilia, and Puglia. Each of these regions count as 2 regions instead of 1 toward the bonus if all their cities are part of the same network. With Pennsylvania, at the end of the game, players are to reveal their stock shares and sort them by rail line, where each rail line is then scored. For the player who possesses the most shares of each rail line, they will receive the most points as shown on that given rail line's card, followed by the player with the second most shares, and so on. If a player has no shares in a railroad, then it will score nothing for that given railroad. It is also worth noting that there are no ties. If 2 or more players have the same number of shares, then the player with the lowest number of shares among them is considered to have the most as they invested first in that given railroad. So the player with share number 1 has a more valuable share than the player with share number 4. And if more players have shares in a rail line than there are numbers points playing places, then players that have the least number of shares will receive nothing. With Europe, any unplayed stations that are still found in the player's reserve will add 4 points to the player's final score. With Netherlands, any loans a player possesses will cause a player to lose 5 points from the final score for each loan they possess. Netherlands also has no bonuses for longest route or most completed ticket. At the end of the game, the player who has the most points will win the game. If there are 2 or more players that are tied for the most points, then the players who completed the most destination tickets is deemed the winner. If there is still a tie and the players are using the Europe map, then the player who used the least amount of their stations will be declared the winner. If there is still a tie and the players are using the Germany map, then the player who has the most number of passenger meeples will be declared the winner. If there is still a tie and the players are using the Markland map, then the player with the highest total of merchandise tokens wins. But if there is still a tie, or the players are using a map that is other than Europe and the map employs the longest continuous route rule, then the player who possesses the longest continuous route is deemed the winner. If playing Legendary Asia, replace this longest continuous route rule with the player who has traveled through the most mountain routes as the winner. When it comes to that of Team Asia, replace player with team comes to the aforementioned win conditions. But if playing upon the Germany map, then ignore this longest route rule with the player sharing victory instead. So for a quick and easy way to calculate the final score, first take the current score and the scored market possession, followed by adding or subtracting the destination ticket values, followed by adding any bonuses such as train stations and route bonuses will be the player's final score. And the player who has the highest final score is deemed the winner. But if there's still a tie after all the variables have been accounted for, then the tied players will share the victory. In regards to Poland, if there is a tie, then the player who has the most completed destination tickets is deemed the winner. But if this is still a tie, then the player who scored the most amount of points with the completed destination tickets will be deemed the winner. But if that's still a tie, then the tied players will share the victory. So with that said, that is what you need to know by scoring within Ticket to Ride. With that taken care of, we can start talking about the variants of the game. If you like this episode, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.